Hey, this is Ralph, and in this video I want to use Rowspan and Colspan in a table to create a rather complicated table layout. Okay, so this was a quiz question that students had not too long ago, but basically I wanted them to make this table, and it really relies on using Rowspan and Colspan along with some other basic styling. So it's not often that you'll have to create complicated table layouts for your web page, but it's good to have those skills down because they're really not that complicated, so that when you do need them, you can go for it. So whenever you're first making a table, especially one that's a non-standard shape, size, that kind of thing, you really want to have a sketch of it handy so that you can visualize what you're going to need to create in the way of rows and cells within each row. So what I suggest is have your sketch of what your plan table layout is to look like, and then start to imagine or start to figure out how many rows will this table have and how many cells within each row will this table have, and then when will you need to use Rowspan and or Colspan. The best way to start to do that is to imagine a complete grid. So wherever I see some lines, I'm going to continue them all the way across. I want a line here, here, going across this way, and going all the way down. And then you're going to have a much better idea of how many rows and certainly how many cells, and then of course how many row spans and call spans. So based on our grid, this table is going to have 1, 2, and 3 rows. Don't be thrown off that this last row is very, very tall. So I know I'm going to have 3 rows in this table. So in my HTML, I'm just going to run down to the body section. I'm going to create a table, and I know I'm going to have 3 sets of table row tags. So there's 1, and I'm not going to put any real data in this table. So I've got my 3 rows, and then I look back at my sketch and I say, okay, well, how many cells are in the first row? There's 1 and 2, and of course, best thing to do is to look at the top left corner of the cell, and that's going to tell you which row it's in. So there's 1 cell here, and then there's another cell there. So there's 2 cells in the first row. So to my first row, let me make this a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to do non-breaking spaces in there. There we go. So I have 2 cells within my first row. I'm going to put some spaces just to make that a little more obvious. Perfect. Then I go to my second row. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. There are 4 cells in the second row. I'm just going to copy this, paste, and paste. I'll zoom out so we can still see it. So I have 4 cells now in that second row. Third row, can't count these cells because they were already counted in row 2 because their top left corners are up here in row 2. So in my third row, there's only 1 cell. Okay, so the basic table is complete for this particular sketch. I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a total of 7 cells. And of course, if I look at my sketch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 takes care of that. Now it's simply a matter of putting in the row span and the call span. Well, my first cell in the first row is spanning 3 columns, and I can look at the divider lines, the imaginary divider lines, and there's 1, 2, and 3. So my first cell in the first row is going to be a call span equals 3. Second cell is perfectly fine. It's 1 row, 1 column. Now for the first 2 cells in row 2, they're using a row span equals 2, and with that divider line you can see that there's 2 blocks. So row span equals 2, row span equals 2. Now for the third cell, Well, really nothing unusual about it. There's no divider line, so it's not taking up more than one row or one column. Same thing for the fourth cell here. And then we get to our last cell in the third row. And it's not taking up multiple rows. It is in a tall row, but it is taking up multiple columns. With that divider line, you can see 2 columns. So once again, Colspan equals 2. And that takes care of the HTML for this relatively complicated looking table layout. Now if I just do a little bit of styling, you're going to see it pretty well. For instance, I'll go ahead and, for my table, I'm going to put in a border. Then I'm going to go to my table cells, and I'll also put a border there. And so this looks a little better. I'm going to put in the property, property border collapse and collapse. Ooh, and also I'm going to put some big padding so we can really see things. I'll just put in a padding of 40 pixels on all the cells. That should make them look nice and large. So if I jump over to my browser and refresh, we'll start to see this table layout appear. And if I compare that to my sketch, hopefully you're going to start to see the similarities. So what's the difference between the table I created and the table in the sketch? Hold on just a second. I'm going to put in some margin. The only differences now is various widths and heights and things like that, and that's easy enough to fix. We can give table cells individual classes and we can style them that way, but we do have the basic shape outlined here in the sketch. Then I would just follow up with widths and heights. Take care.